Good morning students. Our topic for today is photosynthesis. As we all know, this is a very simple process. We have studied this process since the standard 6, standard 5, and this is a process of synthesis of with the help of with the help of light. So photo means, when we break this word into, when we analyze this word, this means light, and synthesis means joining something or adding something. So in this process we add something with the help of light, but what things we add, which things are added, and what is this process all about? Let's discuss with a simple equation. The process starts there is a simple equation, 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O is equal to C6H12O6 plus 6O2 plus C6H12O6 plus 6O2 plus 6 H2O. So this is a simple process, simple equation of photosynthesis, but here is a thing that this water molecule is 12 in number. This was given by von Neil, as he suggested that the oxygen evolved in the process of photosynthesis comes from the water molecules. So water molecules are more in number because oxygen is generated from these molecules, and this whole process requires light. So why light is necessary, and how they use this light to convert CO2 and H2O into the glucose. This is a complex molecule. This is a molecule which is known as glucose, and it is a general formula of glucose. We also call it carbohydrate. Fine. So let's start with the process. So the next question is, why it is required? What is the need of photosynthesis? Why it is needed? Why it is required? So first thing, photosynthesis produces oxygen. So this is the only known method till now which produces oxygen, and oxygen is a must thing for all the living organisms like humans, animals, insects, all of the living organisms. Oxygen is must to survive, and oxygen is produced only by the plants and only by the process of photosynthesis. So this is a must process for the survival of all the organisms. Second, it produces food, or we can say produces starch, glucose, whatever, and we all know that 90% of the food material we consume is comes from the plant, and these food materials are provided by the process of photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is also essential to get the food, because all the organisms except plants, except green plants, all the other plants also like fungi, bryophytes, pteridophytes, angiosperms, all are heterotrophic, and they all depend on the autotrophic plants, means green plants which are able to do the process of photosynthesis. So this is the second requirement. First requirement is, as it produces oxygen, and oxygen is very much must product, but what I can say, it not essential, it is a must, because we all cannot survive without oxygen. All the living organisms require oxygen for their respiration. And second, they produce food which is used by all the organisms. Second, the next thing is photosynthesis process. Increase productivity of agricultural crops. Means if there is more photosynthesis, there is more food production and there is more yield of the crop. So whenever we grow any crop, whenever we sow the seeds, we always want that there should be good photosynthesis, and for that we maintain all the things like water and air and sunlight is always there. So photosynthesis increases the productivity level of any crop, increases its yield. If there is proper photosynthesis, then the yield is more. So this is also a thing which is provided by the photosynthesis. So these are the basic things which photosynthesis does for us. So this is a must process, and must process to get oxygen, to get food, and to increase the productivity. And the last thing which I forgot to tell you, that it also reduces concentration of CO2, carbon dioxide, from the atmosphere. As we saw that during the reaction of photosynthesis, CO2 is involved and water is involved. The CO2 concentration, if accumulates in the atmosphere, if it is not used in the process of photosynthesis, then it will cause global warming, then it will cause, because breathing of CO2 also causes death of many organisms, so it will cause more population. So CO2 concentration is also maintained by using that CO2 during the process of photosynthesis for the conversion of CO2 to carbohydrates. So these are the basic 4 parameters which for which the process of photosynthesis is much required, because without the oxygen we cannot survive, without the food we cannot survive, and in more amount of CO2 we cannot survive. So the photosynthesis is very much essential for these things. So whenever there's question comes like why photosynthesis is necessary, then we can answer with these points. Now the next thing is what are the requirements for photosynthesis? Means what do we need to complete this process? Requirements for photosynthesis. So what are the basic requirements? As 6CO2 plus 12 H2O is converted to C6H12O6 plus 6 O2 plus 6 H2O, and this process uses light and chlorophyll. So what should be the requirements? First requirement should be CO2. CO2, that is carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide comes from where? Carbon dioxide comes from the atmosphere. We will understand with a diagram. Let's suppose here process of photosynthesis is taking process and it is converted into sugar, or we can also say carbohydrate, and things required are sunlight is used, chlorophyll and CO2 from the air, water that is H2O from the roots. Fine. Then water, light, CO2 and H2O, only these things are being used. So, these things come from, first is CO2, CO2 is first requirement, that comes from the air. So, CO2 comes from the air, and the next is water. Water is used by the roots of the plants by absorbing through the land. All water we can also gain, rainwater is also available, but that is not available all the time. So, but plants absorb water all the time for their growth, for their conduction of elements. So, this water comes from the earth through the roots of the plant. And the next is light. Lights come from the ultimate source of light, that is sunlight, and this light is being used by the chlorophyll to convert these two molecules into sugar. So, this is a general process of photosynthesis. The first is CO2, that comes from the air, and second is water, that comes from the roots, from the air or atmosphere. That is evolved during the respiration by the living organism and by many vehicles also, but the CO2 evolved from the respiration is used for the photosynthesis process. And then light comes from the sunlight, but the light is utilized for the conversion of in the form of energy, because whenever we do a process, whenever do any kind of work, like we have to pull something, we have to break something, we require energy. So, this energy is used in this process also. Any process requires energy to be accomplished. So, this process also requires energy, and this energy comes from the sunlight. So, this light is used to convert this molecule, these two molecules into a complex molecules. These are very simple molecules, and these are converted into a complex molecule, that is sugar, glucose C6H12O6, which is used by the plants for their process, for their growth, and the remaining amount is stored in the form of starch in the leaves of other parts of the plant. So, this is a main requirement for the process of photosynthesis: CO2, H2O, then light, or fourth is chlorophyll, and these are the basic requirements. These four are the basic requirements: CO2, H2O, sunlight and chlorophyll, and these four requirements are utilized to complete the process of photosynthesis. But there are two experiments which prove that CO2 is required and chlorophyll is required. So, to test the presence of chlorophyll, there is a experiment, leaf experiment, which we can say like there is a leaf, so if we cover the leaf, half part of the leaf with a paper. So, we took two leaves and we covered only one leaf with a black paper, with the paper which should not be transparent, which should be black or any dark color, because it covers the green surface of the leaf. So, when we put these two leaves into the sunlight, and after some time when we do the starch test is done to test the presence of starch with the help of iodine solution. So, starch test confirms the presence of starch. So, presence of starch is the confirmation of the process of photosynthesis. So, to confirm the process of photosynthesis, occurrence of photosynthesis, we do starch test. So, for starch test, first we put these two leaves into the sunlight near around 20 to 30 minutes, and then after some time we did the starch test by taking some part of these leaves and putting iodine solution on that part only. We took a part from this leaf and we took a part from the covered part of the leaf, and then we tested for the starch, and the test showed that there is no starch. There was starch present in the leaf which was not covered, and there was starch absent in the leaf which was covered with the black paper, which means the process of photosynthesis has not occurred in this leaf, because the leaf was covered with the black paper and sunlight was not there. So chlorophyll could not convert this CO2 molecule into carbohydrate. So the first thing is, this experiment proves that chlorophyll is essential for the process of photosynthesis, because it captures the light energy and converts the molecules into carbohydrate by using that energy. And if chlorophyll is not there, chlorophyll is present only in green parts of the plant, and chlorophyll is not there, which means light will not be trapped, so the process of photosynthesis will not take place. Now the next experiment is presence of CO2. For that, we took a leaf in a test tube in a jar, or we put a cotton which was soaked by KOH, soaked cotton along with the leaf. We took a leaf and we put it in a test tube or in a jar which contained a cotton ball containing KOH solution, which means it was first soaked in KOH and then put into the jar along the leaf, and the other leaf was placed in sunlight. So what does KOH does? So again we did the starch test after the completion of experiment. After some time, after 20 to 30 minutes, we again did the starch test with the help of iodine. The starch test confirms presence of starch, which means photosynthesis was there. So for starch, at first we took two leaves. We put one leaf in a jar along with a cotton ball which was soaked into KOH, and the other leaf was directly put into the sunlight without doing anything. So after the starch test in both the leaves, we found that there was starch present in this leaf and there was no starch in this leaf, which means there was no photosynthesis in this leaf and there was photosynthesis in this leaf. So what was the reason there was no photosynthesis in this leaf? Because the KOH absorbs CO2. So CO2 was not there, and without CO2 photosynthesis cannot take place. So this experiment proves that CO2 is required for the process of photosynthesis. Here CO2 was present in the air, here there was no CO2 because all the present CO2 was also absorbed by the KOH. So the CO2 was absent, and absence of CO2 cannot convert entire water molecule into carbohydrate. So CO2 is much required, so the process of photosynthesis will not take place. So this experiment proves that the photosynthesis required CO2, and the first experiment proved that the photosynthesis required chlorophyll molecule. Fine. Now the next thing is, we will know about some of the unknown facts. We all know about the process of photosynthesis, the reaction of photosynthesis, requirement of the photosynthesis, and why it is necessary. But how did we came up to this equation? How did we know that CO2 is required? How did we know that CO2 and O2 combine and form carbohydrate? For that, many scientists have done some work, and we will know about those facts which we do not know, which we did not know earlier. Historical facts about photosynthesis. So, first experiment, we will start with the experiments. First experiments which was done by John Priestley. It proved that air and water are must for the plant and the process of photosynthesis. For that he did an experiment. There was a mice and a burning candle. Mice So, what did he do? He took a jar and placed a burning candle in a closed jar and a mice with that candle. A burning candle and a mice in a closed jar. So, what will happen? After some time, the mice died, and in another jar he placed the burning candle and the mice and a mint plant. Along with those two, he also placed a mint plant, and in that jar after some time the mice was alive. It was not dead, it was alive. So, what did he concluded? He concluded that the plants, the candle which was burning in a jar, the burning candle the flame was burnt out after some time and it produced CO2, which was named as phlogiston. In his experiment, he named this gas as phlogiston. So, phlogiston caused the mice to die, and in another experiment he put the mint plant, which did not allow the mice to die because of the conversion of that phlogiston into something some other thing which did not allow the mice to die, and because of which the mice remained alive. So, that was named as D-phlogiston. That was named as D-phlogiston. So, he did that experiment which proved that there was something which is known as phlogiston which caused the mice to die, and when we put a mint plant, that converts that phlogiston into D-phlogiston, due to which the mice remain alive. So, this experiment proved that air is essential for the nourishment of any living organism, and light is also essential. So, he did this experiment, and the gases which was known as phlogiston and D-phlogiston, this was CO2 and this was oxygen. So, the mint plant converted CO2 into H2O, and this was proved by Lavoisier. Second scientist was Lavoisier. He identified phlogiston, Lavoisier He identified phlogiston as CO2 and diphlogiston as O2. So, the conversion of CO2 to O2 was done by mint plant, which means that if O2 is there, the mice was allowed. So, air is essential for the nourishment of plants. Then the next was de Schaefer, which proved that water is essential for photosynthesis. And the next was G. Lewis, which found out that the product of photosynthesis was G. Lewis, which found the product of photosynthesis was carbohydrate. And then next was Calvin, who found out the path of carbon in the process of photosynthesis. And gave Calvin cycle, that is C3 cycle. And the next was Hatch and Slack. They gave C4 cycle, fixation of CO2. And then the last was Von Neil, who gave the equation of photosynthesis, that is 6 CO2 plus 12 H2O converted into C6 H12O6 plus 6 H2O plus 6 O2 by the use of light. This equation was given by Von Neil, and the last Arnold and Emerson they gave the reactions of light and dark reactions. These are the two steps of photosynthesis that were given by Emerald and Emerson. So, these were the scientists who did the work to come to the process of photosynthesis, through which we know the process of photosynthesis, that how air is required, how water is required, how CO2 is required, and what is the equation, and what are the light reaction, Dirac reaction. These all were given by these scientists. Calvin cycle we will study further, and CO2 fixation cycle, that is C4 cycle, which we will study in next lecture. So, we will continue to our next lecture. So, now we have done with the photosynthesis, why it is required, what are the requirements, and what were the historical facts. So, now the next question is where does it take place? So, what are the sites of photosynthesis? Site. Photosynthesis process takes place in all the green plants, all the plants which contain green pigment, that is known as chlorophyll. So, in plant cell, when we talk about the structure of plant cell, there are cell organisms which are known as plastids. They are mainly the sites for photosynthesis in the plant cells. In the plants, they are present in every plant cell, and in a section of leaf They are present in thousands of number, in 5 to 50,000 in number. So these are the sites for photosynthesis. They are of three types: chloroplast, chromoplast and leucoplast. So chloroplasts are known as green pigment containing organism, and the pigment is known as chlorophyll. Chromoplasts are responsible for different colors of the flower, because we can see the flower of different colors like yellow, red, purple, white. That is because of the presence of chromoplasts, which provide colored pigments, and these are mainly present in flowers and fruits in other parts of the plant which are not green in color. And the leucoplasts are colorless. They do not contain any pigment, but they are responsible for the storage of lipids, protein, starch for their conversion. So there are three types of plastids, and the chloroplast, which contains chlorophyll, that is known as green pigment, are mainly responsible for the process of photosynthesis. So we will discuss about the chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are the things which are the main organisms which contain green pigment, that is chlorophyll, that are mainly responsible for the process of photosynthesis. So we will discuss about the general structure of chloroplast. And chloroplasts are present. First, let's discuss about the location of chloroplast. So when we look about the surface view of any leaf, this is the surface view. When we look from the outside, we can see this kind of leaf, but when we talk about the TS, transverse section, that is TS view, we will come to know about the structure of chloroplasts, other cell organelles. So this is the upper epidermis, this is chloroplast, and this section is mesophyll tissue. And this is lower epidermis, and this is stomata. So when we discuss about the general TS of any leaf section, TS means transverse section. When we take a leaf and we cut that TS, middle section of that leaves in that way, then we call it TS section. Like we cut from here, and this section, when we look into the microscope, looks like this. So this is divided into three parts: upper epidermis, mesophyll tissue and lower epidermis, and above that there is a layer which is known as cuticle. This is present mainly in plants, and this provides the protection to the leaf, to the epidermis. So this mesophyll part contains chloroplast. So the chloroplast is mainly present in the mesophyll tissue of the leaf. Whenever there is a question that what is the proper location, exact location of chloroplast, then you can tell that chloroplasts are present in the mesophyll part of the tissue. So when we cut the section and when we observe the middle section of the midrib, then we will see the number of chloroplasts in maximum number. So chloroplast is mainly present in mesophyll tissue. So now the next is structure of chloroplast. Single chloroplast. So chloroplasts are what? These are cell organelles which are present in plant cell, and they are double layered. They have two membranes, this is the outline diagram, like this is not a TS kind of diagram. So, when you will observe the TS, you will see the more detailed picture of chloroplast. So, this is the general structure of a chloroplast. First, two membranes, outer and inner membrane, and this is intermembrane space, intermembrane space, and this liquid which is filled inside the chloroplast and which is like the cytoplasm of a cell. Cytoplasm is what? A jelly-like substance which contains cell organelles. So, chloroplast also, the stroma of the chloroplast also resembles with the cytoplasm. So, this is known as stroma, and these lamellae which are joining to these thylakoids are known as stroma lamellae. And these stacks of thylakoids are known as grana. Grana means stacks of thylakoids, and when we take a single grana from these, then this is known as single member, this is known as thylakoid, and when there is a stack of thylakoid, that is known as grana. So, grana is the prime location for the presence of chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is present in these sections. So, in these stacks there is presence of chlorophyll pigment, that is green pigment, that is mainly responsible for the process of photosynthesis, for capturing the light. So, this contains chlorophyll. So, first thing, the plastids which are present in plant cell, and they are of three types: chromoplast, chloroplast and leucoplast. So, chloroplast which contains green pigment is responsible for the process of photosynthesis, and the name of that pigment is chlorophyll. Now, what is the structure of chlorophyll? Chloroplast is mainly present in maximum number in which section? That is mesophyll part of a leaf. And then when we observe inside the structure of a chloroplast, they are present. Chlorophyll is mainly present in the grana, that is the prime location for the presence of chlorophyll. That means the chlorophyll is mainly found in the grana section of that particular chloroplast. So, grana are joined by the use of stroma lamellae, and stroma provides the medium for their presence, for their occurrence, so that they can stay in that particular liquid, like all the cell organism stay inside the cytoplasm. And the chloroplast also contain its own DNA, and it is a double layered membrane organelle. It contains its own DNA, and it can also do replication itself. Fine. So, this is something other, we will not discuss this here. We will discuss only about the structure of chloroplast, so that we can know that what is the location of chlorophyll and where it is present and how it does the process of photosynthesis. So, now the main things comes here. This was the structure of chloroplast. Chloroplasts are present in mesophyll, and grana which are present inside the chlorophyll are the main location for the presence of chlorophyll, which is a green pigment which is required by the during the process of photosynthesis to capture the light. Now, the last thing which is the main part of this photosynthesis process is the mechanism. Mechanism of photosynthesis. So, mechanism involves reaction. So, reaction, as we first saw, there was a very simple equation, but this is not as simple as it looks like. So, this equation involves a large process, a large mechanism that we will study now. So, this mechanism was divided into two reactions by Blackman. Blackman gave two reactions, that is light reaction and the other was dark reaction. Light reaction, or we can say light dependent reaction process, and the second was dark reaction, and we can say light independent. Light independent process, which means the first reaction requires light and the second reaction does not require light. Light is not compulsory for the dark reaction, and these two reactions complete the process of mechanism of photosynthesis. Let's discuss about them in the detail. So, we will understand with the help of a diagram. So, the chlorophyll present in grana, So, first process is photosynthetic process and second is biosynthetic process. So, this is the first portion and this is second portion. So, in first mechanism, that is first reaction, that is light reaction, there are two things involved. That first is conversion of H2O to O2, means oxygen is evolved, oxygen is produced during first reaction, that is light reaction, and this requires light because chlorophyll is present in grana and this chlorophyll traps the energy to convert the H2O into O2, which means H2O is broken down into hydrogen and hydroxide ions, and these hydrogen ions H2O is broken down into H plus and OH minus, H plus hydrogen ions and hydroxide ions, and then these H2 ions are used to produce NADPH2, and this process requires evolves energy also. So, these products are generated in the process of first reaction, that is light reaction. First is oxygen and the second is NADPH2 and energy. These three things are generated during the process of light reaction. Like first reaction, that is photosynthetic phase, which means photosynthesis is done there. Light is utilized to convert, to generate energy and to for the photolysis of water, and these hydrogen ions are used to make NADPH2, and these two things will be used during the second process, that is biosynthetic process, for the conversion of CO2 to sugar, that is starting product and that is final stable product, which we will discuss later during the detailed process of mechanism of these two reactions. This is just the outline that what does takes place, but how does it takes place we will discuss later on. Now, the first phase is photosynthetic phase, where is oxygen is evolved and NADPH2 and ATP are formed. These two things are used in the second process, that is dark reaction, and this is known as dark reaction because light is not utilized there. Only the product of first reaction are being utilized there for the synthesis of sugar by CO2 molecules So, this is the process of dark reaction, and there we can see the product as sugar, we can see the product as O2. Both the products are there and ATP is also there. So, this ATP is used in the second process and some amount of energy is evolved. So, this completes the whole process. So, these are the two reactions. First reaction is light reaction. So, now we will discuss about the steps of these. We will do a comparison, that is light reaction and dark reaction. So, what is the first phase? Light reaction. It was the first stage or first phase, and it is the second phase. It requires light. Light is essential, and here light is not essential. Now, the next thing is oxygen is evolved here. And NADPH2 and ATP are formed. So, this is the first stage, this is the first stage in which so this is the first reaction, and that in next reaction these NADPH2 and ATP are used to convert CO2 into carbohydrate. First reaction takes place inside the thylakoid grana because it contains chlorophyll, and chlorophyll is required for the process of hydrolysis of water, and this takes place inside the stroma of the chloroplast. So, these are the basic differences between light reactions and dark reaction. We can also explain with the diagram, and we can also do differentiation like this. So, in later on lectures we will discuss about the complete mechanism, like how does these reactions actually take place step by step, and what is C3 cycle, C4 cycle, electron transport system, that all are involved during the process of photosynthesis. Thank you.